This session is brought to you by BrainFuse. For over 20 years, BrainFuse has been connecting people who want to learn with experts who love to teach. Find out more about their on-demand e-learning solutions for public libraries, K-12, and academic libraries, including Help Now, Job Now, and Vet Now at brainfuse.com.
Thank you all so much for joining me today. I do wish we were in person. It would be a little bit more interactive, but we are here today to chat about audience personas, how to put them into action, and really what this means is how to define your audience and how to develop your message specifically for them. So just some background. My name is Ashlee. I'm based in central Illinois, and I have pretty strong ties to Senegal in West Africa. I started my career in international development and moved on to local nonprofits, and now I have a consulting business which essentially focuses on messaging in all different forms, from strategy to implementation. And I work specifically with purpose-driven businesses. And my whole goal is to share messages that matter. And the messages that libraries have certainly matter, and they're certainly worth amplifying. So hopefully this will be highly relevant to you and spreading the word about all the wonderful things that you do for your community. So today, just to make sure you're in the right place, our goals with this presentation are to understand demographics and psychographics, whether it's new to you or whether you just need a refresher. Learning how to build an audience persona, and then leveraging those personas for support. Because at the end of the day, that's what you need, right? You need the donors, you need the patrons, you need the people in the community to care about the work you're doing. So we are going to start with demographics and psychographics because this is really the foundation of a persona. This is what makes people who they are and makes them do what they do. So with demographics, it's really who your buyer is. It's the quantifiable parts of their being that are specifically tied to being part of a population. So these are sort of the things that probably come to mind when you think of market research. These are things like your age, your region, like how far out does your library need to cover? Do you only cover your city center, or are you needing to cover the entire rural and semi-urban population, for example? Maybe you would talk to those people differently. Maybe they have different needs. Income level, obviously that comes into play with donor appeals, right? If someone is a high net worth donor, you're going to appeal to them differently and ask for different amounts than maybe a $5 a month donor, because they really care about the library, but they don't have $5,000, $10,000 more to donate at a time, right? So all of these factors are important to who a person is, but they're not sufficient on their own. So that's where psychographics comes into play. And these are really the motivating factors behind why a customer buys, or in this case, a patron uses your services, a donor donates to you, etc. So these are all qualitative elements that pertain to lifestyle, opinions, interests of people of a certain community. And so these are much harder to nail down. They're much less concrete. And so they might be a little bit imposing, but they are absolutely important as you understand who your persona is. So these are things like personality, values, especially when it comes to making decisions, especially with the younger generation, the millennials and younger especially, but donors also, they give based on their values, right? Even things like interests. You don't want to program something that your audience is not interested in. because it takes a lot of work to do library programming. So if you have a program that no one shows up for, there was some sort of disconnect there. Same thing with attitudes, tastes. These are all of the elements that sort of make up who a human is, whereas the demographics are sort of all of the maybe external factors that they can't control. And I also just wanted to mention that these elements play together, and they really influence your brand as a library through customer feedback. So as your library patrons, your donors, your employees, as they give you feedback, you can certainly adapt accordingly, but also what you're putting out there attracts people as well. So if your messaging is off and you're only attracting people who you weren't meaning to attract, that means that you should be evaluating these demographic and psychographic factors to be able to adapt accordingly. And they feed into each other. So really it's what you put out there and what people are giving back to you that influence your marketing and your messaging. So just to dive deeper into this and sort of show some concrete examples, I want you to think about how would you market to a person with the following demographics. Think about maybe what this person looks like, who this person is. So she's a woman. She's in her early 60s. She was born and raised in America. She's very, very wealthy, and she's famous. Think about who this is. If we were in person, I would have you yell out some ideas, but just think about how you would talk to this person, how you would appeal to this person in your marketing. So this person is both Oprah and Roseanne Barr. And while their demographics are the same, at least those factors that we mentioned, you would certainly appeal to these two women differently, right? They would probably care about different things. So their values would come into play. All of those psychographic elements, and even maybe some demographic elements would come into play here. So this is just to show that demographics are not enough. Just because you lump someone into an age group does not mean that you are speaking to them appropriately and appealing to them appropriately. So yeah, just keep that in mind as you're working through and really focus on how both the demographics and the psychographics converge into this persona. I also wanted to show some examples of brands and how they appeal to different psychographic groups and demographic groups. So think of Clean Canteen. Hopefully you know who they are. They're basically a high quality metal water bottle company. And they are highly focused on the ethos, the value add that they bring, much less than demographics. They specifically say from kids to adults to office to backcountry, we have quality products for everyone. So essentially they've negated all demographics. Oh, we're available to everyone. One hole in that logic is that they can really only appeal to people who can afford them and who have the bandwidth to care about environmental and health issues. So while they say everyone, they're still appealing to certain subsets of demographic categories. But really what they're going after in their marketing is values. So they say right front and center next to their name, family owned. At the end, they say family owned again, certified B Corp, lifetime warranty, so that plays to the quality, and then 1% for the planet. So Clean Canteen is really focusing on those psychographics to appeal to their customers. Whereas Justice, the clothing company, is highly, highly honed in on their demographics. So they are very specifically for tween girls, and not very many people outside those very specific demographics care about their products. Of course, there can be outliers. Anyone could theoretically shop there, but all of their marketing would be so honed in on that tiny demographic group. Of course, some factors come into play. And of course, the parent or whoever is shopping for that tween would play into their marketing. but they don't have to worry too much about um, the psychographic factors, because the demographic factor is so overwhelming. And so something like a library, I think, would be much more dependent on the psychographic elements, but this is just to show how both of them play together in some real world examples. So as you're building an audience persona, keep in mind that they are also called avatars, profiles. It can be called whatever you want to call it, but essentially it is talking about, it's putting a face and a name to your core audience, your target audience. So this is one from Extensio that has some factors that may or may not be relevant to you. You might not need to do a full bio. You might be able to do much more extensive than this. Essentially, a persona is a detailed representation of the various segments you might be able to appeal to, right? So this is your target audience. It's not every single person under the sun that could or does use your services. This is who you're aiming to reach, because you really want to get to that one person in your mind that you're speaking to, actually putting a name and face to them, so that, of course, the ripple effect, you'll hit many people who are similar to them or who have contact with them, but you are trying to talk to that one person. And that one person represents your core audience. And it's important to note that you're not stereotyping, and you're not putting in any factors that would be discriminatory or anything like that. You're just trying to boil down various factors so that it creates this sort of superhuman persona, right? And ideally, once you have this demographic and psychographic information, it sort of gives you this visual of this person that you're speaking to, and it allows you to make decisions. That's the most powerful thing about the persona, is it helps you make decisions about your marketing. Obviously, your messaging goes along with that, but also what books to stock, what types of events to run for your donors, what type of programming to run for your community members, what type of community partners you should be trying to pair up with, right? If you know that you have a large homeless community in your area, maybe you can partner with other organizations who work with the homeless population. Maybe you can provide programming. Maybe you can provide resources. And that is something that you would not know if you didn't have that ideal client in your head. So yeah, these are all, this is sort of how it all comes together in this audience persona. So here's one that is this Extensio version filled out. So they have Jill, and they have all these different factors. For them, benchmarking brands that she's interested in would be important. Maybe instead of brands, you would be looking at, for a donor, other organizations that they donate to. For a patron, maybe other community organizations that they use, so that you can advertise at those community organizations, for example. You might also consider things like their daily routine. For example, if you have a lot of moms, are they hitting the library before school, after school? Or maybe while their kids are at school, maybe they like to come to the library and that's their sort of reprieve for the day. Think about things like tech skill. If you're putting together a ton of really awesome online resources, but your main audience isn't very tech savvy or doesn't have home internet, how are you going to combat that? Or are all of those resources going to go to waste, even though you put all of that time and energy into creating them? Things like personality types, hobbies, interests, shopping habits, all of these things play into the decisions that you make. And here's a link to the Extensio tool. I have some other examples of other tools, but I did want to give this as a resource. So here's another one specifically for libraries. This was for a donor. And so we really wanted to think about how to appeal to a donor of certain demographics, so giving potential essentially, but also the things that she cares about. Because if we're crafting messages and we're talking about something that doesn't matter to her, it doesn't matter how much money she has, she won't give. Or if we're talking about things that she really cares about, but the ask is too big or too small, then it won't match up. So these are really how personas come into play. And I just wanted to show that this was not made with a fancy tool. This was made in PowerPoint. You can do this in a Word document. You can theoretically do it on pen and paper. Really, the idea is just getting inside your audience's head. And this manifests itself as a persona. So when we talk about leveraging your personas, you can have multiple personas that allow you to tailor to different campaigns, different segments. So just like your email list is likely segmented into donors, community partners, patrons, etc., you might have at least one persona for each of those segments. But then it's important to not get too in the weeds, but really just have these groups in mind and these core audiences for these core messages. And again, you want to be talking to this single person, even though it might feel counterintuitive. You want to be talking to this one person that represents the whole. And where possible, you should be creating these personas with some data. If you're just starting out and you only have gut instinct to go off of, that's fine. At least you have a base persona to then evolve with. But if you do have data at your disposal, think about things like surveys. Think about things like personal interactions at the checkout counter, or notes from your development director that they have put in the database of saying, oh, okay, now all of a sudden we realize that 9 out of 10 donors care about childhood literacy. All right, that is a key message for your donors. And so you can incorporate that into your persona. Things like clicks on email newsletters, websites, if things are always getting clicked on or always getting ignored, that's an indicator to you. So how can you leverage these tools and these interactions that you already have to then inform your personas that can inform your future decisions? And really the entire point of having a persona is so that you are thinking as your personas rather than thinking as yourself, right? This avoids you designing communications, events, etc., around your own personal biases. And this puts all of the focus on the people that you're trying to serve. So really the goal is to know who you're talking about, who you're talking to, and how you can best serve them. And this is going to apply to your website copy. This is going to apply to the content you create, any outreach you do, and of course, those internal decisions. And even your work culture. If everyone on your staff is aware of the people that you're trying to serve, think about how much more focused their decisions are going to be on the day-to-day and in the long run. So ask yourself questions like, for example, if Mike were your ideal client, what would Mike think of this design choice? Would this be way too busy for them? Maybe are they elderly and they don't like online resources, etc. Can Jane afford this price? For example, we have 2 libraries in my town. Well, one's technically in one town, one's in the other, but the normal public library had video fees to check out, and the Bloomington Public Library did not. So I always went to the Bloomington Public Library to check out my movies because I didn't want to pay the fee. And Normal finally just got rid of their media fees. So they made that decision because they knew that their audience either couldn't afford it or wasn't willing to pay those fees anymore. For example, what would it take to get Spencer to switch over to our library? Maybe you're in a big metropolitan area and someone goes to the further library because they like their resources better or their arrangement better or whatever else. How can I get that person to come back to their home turf? And for example, are these hours convenient for Robin? Again, work schedules, school schedules, maybe second shift people. Are you able to accommodate the people that you're trying to serve? So the whole idea is to put these personas into action, right? So here's an example. This is modified from HubSpot. And so just imagine that you have a weight loss company and you're trying to sell to Tracy. She's your ideal customer and you know that she loves yoga. So what are you going to do? You're going to use images and offers that involve yoga. You might advertise your program at yoga studios. So, this could be directly applicable to libraries. If you know that 50% of your library patrons go to a yoga studio once a week, you could certainly do a partnership where maybe you bring in a yoga instructor to your library, and now all of a sudden you have yoga lovers using the library. Oh, they're going to check out a book while they're there. That's awesome. Or they might find out about some other programming that they would have never considered had you not offered yoga. Also, for example, in this weight loss company one, you want to give her what she wants. So she doesn't really care about the discounts. And so she wants to hear that the service has worked for others and that she's going to get the health benefit without the time commitment. And the way you do this is by highlighting customer testimonials. So again, with a library, you can certainly highlight testimonials of people who have loved your programming, who have donated and really seen the transformation in the community because of their dollars that they've given, etc. You want to give people what they want. So here we see that Tracy is spending all of her free time on Pinterest and reading magazines. So what does that tell you? Don't spend money on Facebook and newspaper ads because she's not there. Instead, share time-saving household and nutrition tips and give her ideas of fun things to do with her family. So with a library, maybe you already know you have book lovers, but maybe also most of your community is on Facebook. So you need to make sure that every single program that you have is made into a Facebook event. Maybe you do put some ad dollars into Facebook ads. Maybe most of your population is aging, and so they do still read the local newspaper, and so your dollars could be well spent there. And what types of tips and ideas and fun things can you do and share and create with your audience that's going to keep them engaged in your activities and going to keep them coming through your doors? So the next level would be that analytics part, that data-driven part. So if you have the capacity with your team, then you can see, all right, what's getting shared, or in this case, repinned on Pinterest, what's getting clicked on. Do an analysis of that, and that will tell you even more about her. So for example, if you did one about after-school snacks, you did a post about after-school snacks, and she absolutely loved it. Make more posts about after-school snacks or kids eating well, right? You need to continue to give people what they want more of. If you have really funny or like punny book posts and people, that always has the most engagement, continue to do book puns. If your audience isn't really into book humor, try something new. Essentially, look at what's performing well and just do more of that. And so a whole other level to this could be looking at Tracy's hobbies beyond yoga, and interests, and think about prizes you can give away. Think about blog posts that you can create. Think about even the images that you use. Make sure your images reflect the community you're trying to serve, right? It can be difficult to find stock images sometimes, but there are a lot of resources out there. And also maybe consider investing in photography of people actually in your library, actually in your community. Think about the words that resonate with your community as well. So all of these things come together, and you wouldn't be able to make any of these decisions if you didn't have that persona in mind. And so just very briefly, touching on the basics of content marketing, which is the next step after you have your persona. Content is really just this portable marketing that connects people to a business, or in your case, a library, and it builds that relationship. It builds trust, it builds expertise. It's information that you're able to provide to them that's either entertaining, or educational, or adds value in some capacity to their life. So again, it builds authority. If you want to be a centerpiece of your community, make sure your content reflects that. And you want to, again, give potential and existing supporters, patrons, exactly what they want. And essentially, content is what moves people to exchange something for the value that you're providing. So whether it's their time, just trust in you as a resource, or their money, that content is what sort of pushes them to make that exchange for the value that you're providing. And content can, of course, be shared via blog posts, podcasts, newsletters and emails, social media posts, maybe even a column in the local newspaper. Those decisions are made based on where your ideal audience already hangs out, or where the potential audience you want to reach is. So the persona, again, helps you make the decision of where to A, start, and B, focus your energy moving forward. And again, the audience's needs and wants should be at the center of all of your content and all of your decisions. And just a note that you don't necessarily want viral content. Sometimes that can be a little bit self-centered. Instead, you should be aiming to improve your key audience. So if you're really honed in on your audience and they're highly engaged, that can be more indicative of success and value than, oh, you had 50,000 people like it, but how many of those people actually came through your doors or actually engaged with the library in real life? So really, your marketing comes down to being an advocate of the consumer and not your business, your library, your nonprofit, etc. So just as a tool to help you create your own persona, I do have a worksheet. You can see it in the URL. It's listed on my website under resources. And it walks through sort of some of the various potentials that you can use to make your own persona, think through your own persona, download it multiple times so you can do one for each of your categories. Really, you just want to get inside their head, have a base, and be able to move forward from there. So yeah, email me if you have any questions. This can be a little bit daunting at first, but really once you have a persona, it makes everything easier. So thank you so much for your attention and your time, and best of luck with your marketing and your messaging.